Big ball, going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
Things are getting really interesting if you're the Bears. Pro days have been taking place. A couple of the prospects that I've got a chance to talk to on the Picks for Polls podcast had their pro days, namely cornerback Zeke Blake of Toledo. Jordan Wright, who goes to UConn, texted me as well this morning, going to try and get something set up. So things are moving in full swing here. It's full steam ahead for the 2025 draft. Welcome to the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. I'm Usayd Koshul. He's Nick Whalen. Check us out on Twitter at Usayd Koshul, @ Nick Whalen, and at Halas Beat. Nick, I don't know about you. We're back after a week. We're both out of town this weekend. I can tell you are way more tired than I am, but this has got to be an important draft for Ryan Poles because it's 4 years on the job, second head coach. He's got his quarterback. The whole, well, Justin Fields wasn't his quarterback excuse is now out the window. Is this the crowning moment for Ryan Poles to be able to say, like, finishing touches on this roster in this draft class?
I think it almost has to be. It's weird because there's also the transition with Ben Johnson. Like if he had Ben Johnson the whole time, I don't think you could say that because it went through of, we're going to break this thing down and get rid of dead weight in terms of salary or older players and, built it up with Flus. But now, after going after some veteran guys in terms of Tooney and Grady Jarrett, I think it almost has to be because, and he has the extra second round pick. So he has some extra ammo after getting some veterans and putting things together in Chicago. And it looks like it could be that. Now, I don't think this draft class is amazing, but I think he could put in 3 or 4 good, solid pieces to making the foundation of this roster, I think, a top 10 team in the NFL. And that would be, I think, like you're talking about, the crowning achievement for Poles, because up until now, Chicago's not had a back-to-back, team that's been solid since the Lovey days. So, if he does that, I think he would put himself in terms of like really good graces with the fan bases and among GMs in Chicago.
Graces with the fan bases. That rhymes. So we both were kind of out of town this week. I think Nick's coming back and dropping a mixtape. Okay, but see, let's talk about that because I remember the first 3 years of the Ryan Pace era, where again the Bears only won 14 games. Mm-hmm. Here, the Bears won, I believe, the same amount of games the first 3 years of the Ryan Poles era. Now, the reason that this whole thing kind of gets interesting to me is this, because when I start to look around the league, I mean, a lot of these teams that end up tearing it down to the studs and rebuilding it, the reason that they stay so consistent is simply because of the quarterback position. Like the Bills, for example, they were probably one of the better teams in the AFC this past season because they had a good quarterback and they were a pretty well-rounded roster throughout. But then it's like I look at the Chiefs, for example. To me, honestly, personal opinion is the Chiefs had zero sort of business being in the Super Bowl, especially after they got smacked by the Eagles. But they were good because they had the quarterback. Now, for me, the reason this has to be the crowning draft for Poles is because it's like, you look at it, well, the first 2 to 3 years when a quarterback's on his rookie deal, you're not really expected to compete big. Like, obviously, Patrick Mahomes won a Super Bowl in his 3rd season. Joe Burrow got to the Super Bowl in his 2nd year. Lamar's never been there. Josh Allen's never been there. Jalen Hurts got there, I believe, in his 2nd or 3rd season as well, and finally won one, I think, in his 5th season. But anyways, the reason I bring this up is because it does take time for teams to kind of draft, develop, and rebuild up the roster to get to a point where everything's working. Now, obviously, I will say this. All these teams I just rattled off, the common denominator is the alignment between the head coach and the quarterback. Ryan Poles, Ben Johnson, and Caleb Williams don't necessarily have that factor at all among the three. But this is still a pretty damn important draft for Poles, if you ask me, simply because the Bears don't have these crazy, massive needs where it's like, hey, if we don't draft a guy at this position, it's the end of the world. Like, we don't have a starter. Like, they have quality depth and quality talent throughout the roster. Now it's just about like continuing to add to that.
Yeah, and you see because obviously the secret sauce people always talk about is having that good young quarterback, but on a rookie contract. So you saw it last year with Houston was actually going for it. So they bring in Danielle Hunter, they let Jonathan Grenard go, they bring in Stephon Diggs. They have a couple of injuries. O-line is decimated with some injuries and bad play, and Houston's not even close to the same team they were the year before. But then you look at Minnesota in division and Washington, both of them loaded up, right? Minnesota brings in Jonathan Allen. They bring in some offensive line. They bring in Javon Hargrave. They bring back Byron Murphy. They made some moves because, like, hey, this is our window to do it. Washington trades for Laramie Tunsil. Like, you go through the list, they trade for Deebo Samuel, just like what Chicago's doing. So you see all of these teams are, I think, loading up because they think, hey, this is actually a really good sweet spot where we can make this push. I listened to this YouTube video on, I can't remember who even had it, so I can't give credit. Apologize in advance. But they were talking about, like, you can't look at NFL teams as like, everyone wants to win the Super Bowl. I get that one. But think of it like a marathon, right? Like, there are times when you're going to have to, like, push. You have to have, hey, I need to make this mile a little bit faster, this 200 meters a little bit faster. There's other times, hey, I got to dial it back. So, and that's how I think, like, the roster in terms of construction and where you allocate your resources goes. So sometimes you're going to make a little bit more of a push. Now they're usually going to make it a little bit back. And so right now, I think the Bears are at the push stage of this marathon in the franchise where they think that they can make the playoffs or potentially a run.
I'm glad you brought up the push factor versus sort of like layback factor, simply because I kind of look at this, and again, I've got over the cap pulled up here on my screen. So the Bears have 68 players under contract right now, and they have $15.5 million in cap space. Now, obviously, part of that is going to be allocated to the draft class, but then you also look at the rest of it, and let's just call it how it is. The Bears can sign, if my math is correct, they need 22 to get to that 90-man roster. Mm-hmm. You look at, they've got 7 draft picks this year, so 68 and 7 comes to what, like 73, 74, I think? Yeah. 75 maybe, right? That leaves room for about like 15 undrafted free agents to sign, which, again, I'm hoping a lot of the guys that we've interviewed end up getting drafted somewhere, or they ultimately end up in Chicago. But anyways, to me, the big thing here to understand with building this roster out is the fact that it's like the Bears are not, like, they brought back Travis Homer over the weekend on a 1-year deal. Again, special teams player. They signed Nick McLeod yesterday to a 1-year deal, who's played like 1,200 snaps on special teams. But also, the Bears have enough flexibility in this draft to the point where if they took a running back, I would be like, all right, cool. But also, if they didn't take a running back, based on the way that Poles is kind of choosing to build this roster over the last couple of years, there are these sort of like hidden gems there, like an Ian Wheeler, for example, that I look at and I'm like, could he possibly pop off and be the running back that Ben Johnson's looking for? So it's very much this like, yeah, the Bears free agency moves show that they're being aggressive because they spent their whole cap on 3 players, let's call it how it is, between Dalman, Jarrett, and Dayo Odiengbo, which I was practicing saying his name over the weekend. But I also kind of look at it, and it really does, to me, set the stage for how is this team going to value construction versus positional value in a few weeks here.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought running back because that's something that I put out a take on Twitter today, but I feel like we need to discuss this because I've been pro Genty, I think, before it was really popular. But in terms of positional strength, I think it's something to discuss. And actually pivoting off of that slightly, I'm very against Chicago taking Omarion Hampton at 10. I think that does not make any sense whatsoever. I think Omarion Hampton is a good player. I'm not saying that. But I think the gap between Genty and Hampton is significant. And the gap between Hampton and that next group is significant. But if you're telling me I can go Hampton and then you go down to pick your defensive end at 39, let's say it's Jackson, right? From Landon Jackson, the big guy from Arkansas, who's had a bunch of knee injuries, by the way, as well. So makes me a little bit more cautious on him, even though he's the body type Dennis Allen wants, And then you could say interior O-line, or at 10, they could pick your favorite O-lineman if someone likes them there, or pick your favorite defensive lineman that's there, which I still like Mike Green. And then you take an Ohio State running back there. And so to me, like the difference between a defensive end prospect at 10 and at 39, or O-lineman, which I'm not really for, but I'm just saying for the case. But the gap between Hampton and Ohio State guy, or a Caleb Johnson guy, if that's your person, etc., I don't think it's that significant. So to me, like, I think we need to talk a little bit about the positional value. And to go deeper in this, man, I'm ranting, but is what's the end goal? Okay. So let's say whoever the Bears draft at 10 turns out to be the best guy at their position. Okay. Let's just talk numbers, y'all. Okay. It's not going to be a quarterback, so we'll just get rid of that one. Let's say it's a defensive end. They draft Shamar Stewart, who's super just high ceiling, low floor guy, and he hits the ceiling. He's one of the best defensive ends in the NFL. Best defensive ends in the NFL right now, making $40 million. Okay. Now let's look at running back. Best running back in the game, if they went with Genty or if it's Hampton, which I wouldn't like, they make $20 million. Now, the odds of Stewart becoming that top guy are less than Genty or Hampton becoming that guy. But you're telling me you got to get two Genties or Hamptons to hit what the defensive end is? So that's where this positional value comes in. Corner, it's what, like 30-ish million right now. A mid offensive tackles, 20 million, which is what a running back's worth. So when we're talking through this positional value thing, it comes down to money. Because some people are like, well, just do this. You're going to have a rookie, in a whatever position on a rookie contract. But you can, so it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, because if you had a rookie left tackle, a rookie D end, a rookie 3 technique on a rookie deal, that's more value than having a running back or a tight end or whatever. So I know I've talked about all those positions as options for Chicago, but the positional value part of it and the money part of it, when you look at your whole roster, matters a lot more than I think people are really putting into the context of the team and making this push.
And I will say this. So I was writing up some scouting reports for the Bear Report last night. And obviously, the guy from South Carolina, Kyle Kennard, and then the edge rusher from Boston College, Donovan Eziraku, I believe his name is. Like, to me, I mentioned this in both scouting reports, is I was like, you look at both, and those are going to be guys where, yeah, they're generating some buzz, but if you look at in terms of the overall big boards, like, you're going to see some of those guys ranked as top 10 to top 12 edge rushers, right? Mm-hmm. As second round picks. But also you look at the Bears board, some of these guys are going to be significantly lower on the Bears board, simply because you're factoring in, scheme fit, durability, team culture, all that type of stuff. But it's like, to your point about, like, would you rather have 2 Ashton Genties or a Shamar Stewart? This is, to me, where the conversation kind of gets really sort of polarizing in a sense too. It's interesting, but it's polarizing. Let's put it that way. Because part of me is just like, hey, it'd be great to have that Shamar Stewart type player who for a decade, let's say, is dominating and is popping off, right? Whereas the other half of the argument is taking a running back like an Ashton Genty probably helps you maximize your window more, but then you also run the risk of not possibly paying him a second contract. Mm-hmm. But I will say the risk of drafting a running back so high is that as much as we sit here and we're like, oh, well, running backs don't get a second contract, like Saquon's gotten 3 contracts in the time he's been in the league so far. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be eligible for an extension next year at this time. He's going to get a nice little contract. David Montgomery just got a pretty decent extension as well, I believe. So then it ultimately kind of comes down to this factor of, like, teams are showing that it's not just about, like, oh, you're a running back, we're not going to pay you. It's no, if you're productive, we are going to go ahead, we're going to pay you. Now, part of that also factors into, do you see this running back slowing down? Not really. I don't see Ashton Genty slowing down, but I guess I do have my concerns. And if it's not Ashton Genty, I mean, I would bet you right now the Ohio State Pro Day is Wednesday the 26th. So it's tomorrow, actually. And I mean, the Bears always have a favorable delegation of guys out to Ohio State. And I'm sure you can bet right now that they're going to be scouting both the Ohio State guys in Judkins and Henderson, because the way that I look at it in terms of construction versus positional values, if you can't get Ashton Genty, you can't get him because he's not on the board, or you don't draft him because you pivot somewhere else, one of the two Ohio State guys suddenly becomes an option, which then I think brings back the conversation of roster construction versus positional value.
Yeah, 100%. And also, like, in our minds, whoever they pick, we're like, this guy's going to be good. Like, they're going to make it. Like, every player has a potential to bust. So, like, you have to, like, this is honestly, it's a math equation, and we're looking at probabilities here, and the probability of a player hitting and what level they're going to hit at, because I think Genty is a blue chip player. Don't get me wrong, but blue chip player running back, what's the plus EV? So, like, their expected value on your team versus something else. Like, we know quarterbacks have a huge bust rate, but quarterbacks have the highest potential to help your team. Look at Jaden Daniels last year. Like, Washington was a bad team. Goes there and they go to NFC Championship game. Like, a lot of other things happened, but he was a huge factor there. So, like, CJ Stroud year before, like, it keeps on going. So that's why teams keep taking shots at quarterbacks, because that's their shot to improve, to get to that next pedestal. They're not taking shots at quarterbacks. So, like, it'd be cool if we had a good quarterback. It's because they know that's what's going to help them, become an elite team, make a run, get in that window, etc. And that's why they keep taking shots on quarterbacks. And I think that's the same thing with offensive tackles. One thing I think we have to talk about is, I know people are really obsessed with left tackle right now. Offensive tackles in general are about equal in terms of value right now, because teams are in shotgun so much. It used to be left tackle when you would drop back under center, because that'd be your blind side, right? Per se, if you're right-handed quarterback, but that's not really the case anymore, because right tackles, I think, money-wise, are actually making slightly more money than left tackles. That's just it for now. But so offensive tackle is one of those positional values. Quarterback, obviously, we talked about. DNs, 3 techniques, and wide receivers and corners. I think that's really the spots. And so you look at teams like Philly, you look at teams, that are always just loading up the D-line, loading up offensive linemen, taking shots at corners, wide receivers, etc. And then they're band-aiding in linebackers and running backs. And so, I'm trying to think of, while we're thinking about 10, the other thing, man, you said, I'm curious what you think, 39 and 41 might steer where Chicago goes, because, in a very small sample size we're looking at as one draft class. Okay, if there's a lot of DNs or a lot of running backs or a lot of whatever else, we can get them at 39 or 41. Maybe we should go somewhere else at 10 and then get those guys when there's a bigger pool later.
Okay, so getting back to sort of the contract conversation here, and I believe that this is worth bringing up. So you look at the draft the last couple of years, dating back to 2017 and 2018, I mean, there's really only been 2 running backs that have been selected in the top 10. The first one is Saquon Barkley, 2nd overall in 2018. The next guy is Christian McCaffrey in 2009 or 18, I believe, 17 or 18, whatever it was, right?
Bijan too. Bijan went 8.
Oh yeah, Bijan Robinson as well. Okay, but just for perspective here on the idea of, second contracts, and it comes to these running backs. So Saquon, right, when he was the number 2 overall pick, for perspective, right, made $7.7 million a year, okay, on his rookie deal. Got it? Christian McCaffrey made $4.3 million a year. And again, he signed it back in 2017. So I guess But again, you kind of look at the differences in draft slots, where one was 2 overall, the other was 8 overall. And so now I kind of look at this whole thing, and it's it's kind of a positive for the Bears if they do take Ashton Genty, because again, you're getting a damn good player. But then also knowing the way that the running back market's kind of been reset, Ashton Genty's probably going to be making $8 million a year as a top 10 pick. Now, Bijan Robinson obviously is sort of a I don't want to say like Bijan Robinson's obviously underperformed, right, over the last couple of years, but like his deal was 4 years, $21 million is what it was, almost about $22 million. So like you look at that, he's making $5 million a year. And with the way that, the markets kind of change, it's very likely that Ashton Genty's making $7 million a year, if the Bears take him in the top 10. But getting back to your point about like, what do you do at 10 than 39 and 41? 39 and 41 to me provide more flexibility than any other picks that the Bears have. And you could argue that league-wide, they're the most flexible picks of all, simply because there's going to be guys every single year that slip to the top half of that first round. And that means that a team that's straight picking in the 50s, let's say, is going to want to move up to possibly take a prospect out of 39 or 41, which means that the Bears in a situation are probably going to recoup some of that day 3 draft capital, but then also possibly pick up an extra second round pick.
Well, and I think so. Kind of going back, like you were talking about the money that the running backs would make for being a rookie. I think that's a big part of this scenario too, because like if the Bears took Genty at 10, or he gets picked by the Raiders at 6, doesn't matter. He's going to be like a top 10 paid running back in the league from the jump. But if you had, you look at what Caleb makes, Caleb's not even top 20, probably. You know what I mean? And so, that's, I think, where that there's also more value in not drafting a guy. Tight end, you could say the same thing. Not drafting the guy and making them be, higher in their position in terms of salary, because you're saving. Like let's just say, we'll spin a different way. Let's say the Bears get Mason Graham at 10. People will be excited, right? We talked about it on our last pod. Mason Graham at 10 would be, you're hoping, a disruptive force, right? As a 3-tech, which would be awesome. You have him locked in for 5 years, if you use the 5th-year option. But he will be 30th, 40th highest paid D tackle from the start. So you have a better gap in terms of money you save that you can allocate somewhere else on your roster right away, versus going running back or tight end or center, guard, things like that. So, but I like Genty. I'm not saying he's not a good player, y'all. Here's another kind of scenario. And again, I know this is kind of a best case scenario. So going back, I think you mentioned Zeke Elliott. Maybe not. This is a ways back, right? Zeke was the 4th overall pick. There was debate then. It was like, should they really go running back? And we know who all runs that organization down there. It makes the choices. But they went with Zeke. The pick after that was Jalen Ramsey. Okay. So people are like, man, they should have went with Jalen Ramsey. They had a need there, etc. Let's just say they went Jalen Ramsey. Okay. Because I think that was the main debate. In the second round, they took Jalen Smith, came off of that, injury in the college football playoff, and then didn't really amount to what they wanted to as a linebacker. The next running back taken in the second round that they could have taken was Derrick Henry. And, there's a lot of times there's good talents that are running back that fall there. Nick Chubb falls in the second round. The Bears got David Montgomery in round 3. And so I'm just thinking of like, to have a back that can be solid to good, likely not great, but who knows? You can get those guys round 2, round 3, 39, 41, like we're talking about 72, maybe. You're not going to get, it's hard to get a game-changing player positional value, left tackle, right tackle, corner, receiver, etc., because they don't fall. Because if they're that good, someone would take them. For people that are on this Will Campbell's a left tackle train, if Will Campbell was a franchise left tackle, which I hate that phrase, by the way. I don't even know what that means, Usayd. A franchise left tackle? Does that mean they're a top 32 left tackle? Anyways, if he was a franchise left tackle, or in my mind, that means a top 10 left tackle, he wouldn't fall to 10 overall. He would get picked. You wouldn't see him in mock drafts that are still there. There's reasons why he's there. Okay, y'all. So to me, like, the positional part of it, I think, is something that polls could crush this draft potentially, and set the Bears and Caleb in terms of finances and team talent wise, like, awesome moving forward if he crushes this.
I am glad that you mentioned the name Will Campbell because Wednesday's a big day for the Bears. You've got the Ohio State Pro Day happening, then you've got the LSU Pro Day happening. The Texas Pro Day, I believe, already happened for the Kelvin Banks Hive. But see, tomorrow to me is basically, and again, we're recording this on March 25th, but tomorrow to me is kind of the day where it's like you start to find out what the Bears like. The Bears aren't going to ever reveal their draft plans, obviously, but some of these measurements that we're going to get coming out of the pro days tomorrow at Ohio State and again at LSU, they to me have the potential to flip the discussion upside down of what do you do at 39-41, because ultimately, let's just say the Bears go ahead and Donovan Jackson or a Josh Simmons from Ohio State, one of those two guys tests really well. Let's just say Will Campbell tests really well. Then the conversation of, all right, is it really going to be offensive lineman at 10 overall? That comes into play. But then again, it's kind of just like you're not taking a tackle or an offensive lineman in the top 10 to sit them behind Jonah Jackson or Joe Tooney. Because if that were the case, you probably would not have traded for either of those guys anyway. Not to mention, like, Jonah Jackson, the Bears extended, so I don't see the Bears taking a guard within the first 3 picks. But I do believe that at 39 or 41, if the Bears trade out of either slots and they get a 3rd, 4th, or another 5th round pick in the process, then all of a sudden, to me, the question sort of becomes, do you take with the trade back, do you take offensive linemen later to kind of sit, draft, and develop for a year or two? Or do you kind of go the route of like, let's just get instant contributors?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, another thing, too, when we get closer to the draft, I mean, it comes down to like, where are there spots on this roster to like make the team? You know what I mean? Like, because that's part of it, too, is like how many are going to dress on Sundays. Like you have to fill it out eventually. It's not just always going to be BPA. But yeah, no, that's an interesting thing. One also small thing that I saw, Tony Pauline, I don't know if you follow him or not. He's found this to be the case, I think, with 2 people. So these pro days are going to be more interesting in terms of the arm lengths at the combine were short, and there was 2 different guys that had a half inch longer at their pro day or even like the Shrine game versus the combine. So, all of the talk about Will Campbell and, wingspan and arm length, because it's 2 different ones, maybe that could change, and then all of a sudden he does become a higher pick or people think that he could stick there. Yeah. So I think it's going to be interesting. In my mind, ideally, Chicago, I think, goes D-line at 10, and then they go running back later, O-line later, because I don't have the PTSD the Bears fans have. Like, they've fixed the O-line. Like, it's good, y'all. I have a scenario for you, Usayd. Ben Devine on Twitter put this out there, and I started thinking about it more. And I was like, I actually don't mind this. It might cost more. We'll see. But in terms of the draft trade charts, okay, the Bears could give up 10 and either 39 or 41 to move up in the draft. And it's sounding more and more like one's going to be Cam Ward, 2 likely Travis Hunter, maybe not. We'll see. 3 Shedeur Sanders, potentially to the Giants, which would mean I think the top talent in the draft is Abdul Carter falling to 4. Would you? And I know they just signed Dio Odengbo, right? But do you package 10 and 39? We'll just use the higher one to move up and get Abdul Carter at 4.
First off, I love the scenario. Let me just say, yeah, the Texas Pro Day was today. I'll get to your question. Ryan Poles and Eric Bieniemy were there at the Texas Pro Day. But, okay, see, jumping from 10 to 4, right? Like, I would definitely do it. And first off, it's key to know, when I talk to people around the league, the one thing I always kind of hear is, hey, if the Bears do decide to make a trade, then in the second round, depending on if they're trading up, teams are going to want the higher of the 2 picks, which is obviously going to be the Carolina pick. That is kind of a natural thing. Now, I would do it, but then the other part of this is it does take 2 to tango. And to me here, one of the big, I guess, issues that I have is, what if New England says, hey, we'll take 10 and 39, but we also want a draft pick in 2026. Now, depending on what the draft pick is, that to me becomes a major conversation as well, because if it is your first round pick, well, do the Bears believe that they're going to be good enough to the point where they're basically giving up a back half of the first round draft pick to be able to grab Abdul Carter? Because that effectively kind of is like a second round pick. Or do the Patriots feel like, yeah, the Bears are going to suck next year, so we are going to go ahead and we're going to pull this off because we feel like we're going to get a top 15 pick. Now, like I said, personally, I'd be all for trading 1039 to, and let's just throw in a 2026 third rounder there for a sweetened deal.
Sure.
I'd be all for that to grab Abdul Carter, because I do believe that he is that guy. He is that game changer. Plus, I mean, let's call it how it is. Dennis Allen to me has never had a rookie edge rusher that has the talent and potential that Abdul Carter is going to be coming in with. But the other half of me is also like, what if the Patriots say, well, we want your first round pick and that's it? Then I'm kind of just like, I would stray away from the deal then. And again, part of my justification is it's just like, what if the Bears aren't good next year? What if it's a situation to where they compete, but they don't win a lot of games because it's like you mentioned, it's the year one of the Ben Johnson era. Caleb's kind of getting his feet wet in a new system. And so then it's going to kind of lead to, did the Bears really give up basically 2 ones to move up 6 spots? Like That's where the conversation gets really messy.
Right, because if you look at a couple of years ago, Houston moved back up after they got C.J. Stroud to get Will Anderson. Now, they went from 12 to 3, and they gave up, I believe, a 1, a 2, a 1, and a 2 to do it. And to me, there's no chance I'm doing that. Now, again, 10 to 4 is less of a trade up. In general, the draft trade charts is what you go off of, and doing 10 and 39 for 4 is actually equal. So, adding a third round sweetener is what it is. But normally the overpays come into play when it's for a quarterback, and this isn't that scenario. So they'd be after that. So yeah, it would be interesting. Again, does Abdul Carter fit the Dennis Allen mold, etc.? But to me, that guy is such a fast twitch athlete and can bend. He would really be the last piece on this defense, because then you have 3 pass rushers on the outside, you're rotating 3 pass rushers on the inside, and you're going to do really well. And that way you're not as worried about the back. And we're talking about Tyreek Stevenson last week. So yeah, I think it could be super interesting. The last caveat I have, man, for the pod is this. On tape, again, I don't know the off the field stuff. Mike Green is a guy I really like. I would call him like Abdul Carter light, similar size. He had his pro day yesterday, and his 3-cone and short shuttle were awesome. He had a 6.85 3-cone, and to put in that context for people, that's better than Daniil Hunter, Micah Parsons, Brian Burns, Hassan Reddick, Nick Bonito, Khalil Mack's 3-cone, and his short shuttle was 4.25, which is better than, of that list, Reddick, Parsons, and Hunter. So you've got this quick twitch that can bend, that led the nation in sacks. If, again, off the field stuff checks out, which from what I've actually read, he wasn't charged or even questioned. But I would definitely be okay with him as, like, you can't move up to get that pass rusher and Carter, so then you settle for Green.
Hey, last thing I'm going to say, because you mentioned Mike Green, is this. The Bears love their Senior Bowl prospects. I believe they've taken one every single year over the last couple of years. And guess who really lit it up at the Senior Bowl? Some edge rusher from Marshall by the name of Mike Green. But that's going to do it from us. Make sure you're checking us out on Twitter @_Nick Whalen, @Usayd, Koshul, @Halas B. Check out the Picks 4 Polls podcast as well, the Bear Report website, and the Bear Report podcast with Zach Pearson and Steven Johnson. We're back to our regular schedule this week. We've got this episode on Tuesday, and then got another one dropping on Thursday night, Friday morning. So there's a ton of stuff to kind of talk about as it relates to the draft leading up to the NFL's busiest weekend of the offseason. But we will see you guys Thursday night / Friday morning. Have a fun and safe rest of your day, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to bear down. We'll see you guys next time.